Hello, as promised, although a little belated, I'm getting to the part two, I guess we'd say, of the new function report that came out in July of 2024. It came out in conjunction with the new rule change where the look back period for past relevant work is only 5 years instead of 15. Okay, so we did go through part one, and I will find that and try to attach it in some way, shape, or form here, or at least put it in the comments so you can go back to it if you need to. And let's go to part two, which would be the first page of a particular job section. So you know how the cover page is a list of all the jobs you had in the past 5 years. And then 2 pages at a time thereafter, they give you space to write about 5 of those jobs. Many of you will not have had 5 jobs in the last 5 years, but it does happen. Okay. So it's funny because I'm looking at our form-fed fillable work history report that we use when we take our clients' information with them and plug it in so it's neat and concise and nothing's left out. We help our clients with their work history report. It's so important for everybody, but especially for the over 50 crowd. It's important for everybody else as well, but more so for over 50. And I will say people who are closely approaching 50 or in their 40s, particularly later 40s, the work history report that you submit on this claim, and let's say this claim tanks you, like you don't succeed on it, but you can file again. They often look at your old work history report. So you don't really want to be having erroneous stuff in the first time you explained your job, because then the second time, if it's still in the last 5 years, I don't know how that will look. But in any event, some of this you'll see is the very, very top is the same. We have the job title in there, rate of pay, and whether it was per hour, per day, per week, per month, or per year. So if it's an hourly rate, obviously you'd click on hour. If it's an annual salary, you would click on year. Sometimes we see, it's usually yearly or hourly. Occasionally I will see weekly. But the funny thing is, most people aren't even paid weekly anymore. If they're going to be paid, they're paid bi-weekly, but that's not an option. Hours per day, days per week. Hours per day, days per week. I'm going to reiterate that, guys. I can't tell you how many times I'll see 8 and 40. 8 hours per day, 40 days per week. We figure it out and we fix it for them, but yeah, that's pretty funny. I know that can be, if you are working weird, unpredictable hours per day, let's say sometimes it's 4 hours, sometimes it's 8 hours, and varying weeks, I would literally go in there and put like the range, if it's 3 to 5 hours per day, 3 to 4 days per week, some sort of part-time job like that, I would put that. If it's if it varies, but it ends up being 40, that's a whole nother thing. But generally, I mean, even if you worked 50 hours a week, it's still going to be chalked up to a full-time job, right? Because it's over 40 or even like high 30s they're going to consider. Okay, here's where we get to the change right below. For the job you listed in title, job number 1, describe in detail the tasks you did in a typical workday. Examples of tasks include stocking shelves, greeting customers, scheduling appointments, or maintaining records. Okay, that is not really different from the prior one. Everything else after this is going to be. And I'll explain that in a minute. So when you address this, please do not treat it like you're writing a resume to get a job. Don't exaggerate. Don't get into, I would say, because you have limited space here. All right, use it wisely. I wouldn't be putting in there sophisticated proprietary names of XYZ software. That's like minutia detail. That's not going to be any different from any other software. I mean, if you use software, then just say, I use computer and software. You don't have to get into the nitpicky. I did blah, blah, blah. I did Linux, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just, that's not what they're getting at, really, because you're not using this job to get another one of those Linux jobs, if you're a computer guy, or, you know, and you're not impressing anybody because there's no one to be impressed. And to puff oneself up is trying to make one look like they had a more sophisticated job than they did. That lends itself to higher appearances of managerial skills. When the SSA has to ask, did he do this job again? Or are any of those skills that he learned, such as managerial, supervisory, transferable to something less arduous that he could do? They're going to be more likely to find that you can do other work. So don't blow up things that don't need to be blown up. All right, blown up. And we'll get into some of that later, because this page actually delves into all that. And this is what the old form did not do. The old form asks you, do you do reports? Do you use equipment? And I think what the other one, oh, did you have technical skills? And it was a checkbox answer, that's it. Here they really want to know. Now, we used to let them know, despite the fact that it wasn't asked for on the form that they have claimants do, because I knew those questions were going to be relevant to the decision-making of whether you can do past relevant work or you can transfer those skills to some other job that is not your past relevant work. But you wouldn't necessarily know that. So that's why, and it's important, because if you check that you supervise and it turns out you do it 5 minutes a day when you take attendance, that wouldn't be supervising as a job. That's just 1 minute of your day. But when people would click off supervisor, bada bing, guess what? She has supervisor skills. You can do that from a sit-down job in a very simple fashion without having to do all that physical lifting you used to do. Game over, not disabled. All right. I'm being a little funny here, but it's important, these details. Okay. So do your description of what you did. And I can't even really, you know, describe any better than that from here, because all of your jobs are so different, right? Everybody's. So I will leave that up to you. I know when we get them, we hone them. For instance, I'll give you one thing I prefer. If you work at a department and you all do the same thing, and you're receiving invoices and filing them, or making sure they get paid, or correcting customers, you know, reviewing their application, you're not the only one that does that. There's many people that do that. I would preface everything with assisted in the task of, but assisted with it, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're not doing the whole thing. So let's not make it sound like you are. You're assisting. All right. Okay. Going down to the second question. If any of the tasks listed above involves writing or completing reports, describe the type of report you wrote or completed and how much time you spent on it per workday or work week. This is a big deal. If you respond to a customer email, that is not report writing. That is communication and interacting with, say, the public in written fashion. Reporting, to me, is more of when we have to compile information, usually on a monthly or quarterly basis. It could be less. And maybe your boss wants a weekly report on blah, 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 or annual. You compile the information. You distill it to whatever things you're trying to get at. It could be in writing after you've done the math, or it could be spreadsheet fashion, sophisticated, unsophisticated. If you are at a computer and you just print, you press the button that says pop out of the report on blah, 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 because it's automated. That's not you writing or completing a report. That's you pressing a button. So I wouldn't include that. That would not be reporting. This is how I see it. If you do things like probation officer and you have to do a probation report, that would be a report. obviously. I mean, you're actually distilling one person's probationary information into a required report or whatever. And I'm pulling that out of my butt because I really don't know what probation officers do or corrections officers or whatever. But I was just thinking more along the lines of like law enforcement. They have to do a lot of, well, every time they do a police report, that is a report. You are distilling a bunch of information into a cognitive framework for someone else to be able to get to the gist of it like this. Okay. Reports. The next section, if any of the tasks listed above involved supervising others, describe who or what you supervised and what supervisory duties you had. Examples of supervisory duties include evaluating employee job performance, making schedules, or maintaining time records. Okay, so this is really important to include if you perceive yourself as having supervisory duties. And by the way, just because your title includes supervisor, a lot of employers give nice titles so they can triple your work and pay you an extra $1 an hour. So let's call a spade a spade. If you are technically senior to 3 people under you in the meat department, everyone knows their job, everyone does it. But one person's just got to make sure that all 3 are there. And if one isn't, they check off the absentee. All right. And if that is the extent of the supervision during the day, because you're all doing your own meat department duties hands-on, you're not supervising those 3 people every minute of that day. Maybe you check on lunchtime to make sure they're doing okay. All right, 2 minutes. 2 minutes to make sure all 3 arrived when they were supposed to. All right, so now you got 4 minutes. I don't know. So I would say that I double check my 3 less senior coworkers arrived. At lunchtime, I check to see how they're doing. Total time about 5 minutes a day. And the importance of making sure the SSA knows that you are not hands-on supervising as your job. Your job is cutting that meat, you know, or, you know, if you're in office, you're a, I don't know. I'm trying to think what was the last one I was just doing. Who was oversaw 3 people, but they were all on the same team doing the same work. It's just that one was more senior and others less senior. So that's kind of how that goes. Make sure that it's shown that it's 5 minutes of that day. What percent of that day is that? Is that 1%? If that, you want it to be clear that because later on, if you did supervising sufficient to have learned it as a skill to do it full time, you could be a supervisor and now you have transferable skills and you've got this other job you can do when you lost your case. All right. So be very clear on how minimal it really is. If you are a team leader, if you are a working supervisor, a working foreman, same idea on a construction site. Make sure if that time frame is really minimal, because technically we don't multitask, right? This is what they say. Technically we don't multitask. So we have to stop doing something to go and address a coworker we're supervising. Okay, so when we go back to doing our thing, we are not still supervising that person. We might be called supervisor, but right now we're doing meat cutting or whatever, you know, the bulk of our job is. It's really important. All right. Moving along. In terms of evaluating employee job performance, I would make it very clear if I do have supervisory duties that I do not hire and fire if I do not have the authority to pick and choose who gets hired and fired. If you do employee job performance, PIPs or evaluations for their, you know, whatever the regular courses for that company, or if they're going to get a promotion or a raise and they want your opinion, you need to fill out a form as to how they've been performing. Make it clear that you have no authority to hire or fire. You just provide information, you know, from the job performance that you witness. All right. Because hiring and firing is pretty high level managerial. In fact, most companies go through an HR to make sure no laws are violated. You know, whether it could be, oh, is there enough warnings, documented warnings, so that this person isn't going to like come back and say that they were fired for discriminatory reasons, as opposed to the fact that they didn't show up 3 out of 5 days every week. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Hiring and firing is unless you're in like a mom and pop, and you are a mom and pop, it's probably not something you do unless you're big end. It's going to come from management of HR or something high up like that. Okay. Moving along, list the machines, tools, and equipment used regularly when doing this job and explain what you use them for. Examples of equipment include computer, telephone, forklift, air compressor, or meat slicer. Back to the meat again, huh? I am a meat eater. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. But people, when they used to say, do you use equipment, people would say no if they used a computer or a telephone, because we think of that as just every day now. But that is indeed equipment, okay? If there's printers, fax machine, scanner, I would include that. Anything bigger and greater and more impressive than things just mentioned, I would include it. You're all going to know from your own industries what you've been using. And I hope this gives you, the fact that they're asking for it kind of gets people thinking about it a little more, which is good. And by the way, the reason why this is important, a lot of impairments for many people start to make it dangerous for them to be around hazardous machinery or moving parts. It is a specific section in SSA rules about that, vocationally and such. So if your job entailed a forklift, for instance, use, I would assume that is movable parts. That would also probably be potentially at heights and stuff like that. If your job required that, and you now have balance issues or vertigo, you know, various issues that would make that unsafe, that is now a job you can no longer do. If that's the only job you had in the last 5 years and you're over 50, you've just gotten this much closer to winning your case because you made it clear that your job required that machinery. So definitely be sure to include those things and don't be lazy, guys. The last question on this page, and then we'll cut this short. Did this job require you to interact with coworkers, the general public, or anyone else? Yes or no? If yes, describe who you interacted with, the purpose of the interaction, how you interacted, how much time you spent doing it per workday or work week. Examples include answering customer questions on the telephone for 5 hours per day, or showing clients properties for sale in person for 4 hours a day. Okay, so we have coworkers, the general public. They used to ask about supervisors, but everyone has a supervisor, so they don't need to do that. Okay. Although I would probably put in there, like if I had to interact with him every 3 minutes, you know. It's kind of self-explanatory, but it can include, you know, running over to your coworker's desk across the room to ask a question because it's quicker than emailing. It can include, obviously, if you're in retail, the public. If you're a cashier, that would be a lot of public interaction. And if you did it like all day long, 7 hours a day, you're behind it, put that down. Put down that it was 7 hours. It should be kind of evident from cashier, but Sometimes the cashier's job also involves stocking and cleaning the bathrooms and all these other things. But if you had to interact with the public 7 hours a day for that job, let's say now you have anxiety or difficult social phobia or anxiety where dealing with the public just starts to get you, feeling crazy. You've developed an anxiety disorder at a level which would not tolerate dealing with those public people 7 hours a day behind the register. That would be important to know, because if your medical records for that mental health treatment for an anxiety, which you have to prove you have it, would then potentially and hopefully likely create a situation where this job can no longer be considered doable by you, such that you could no longer do past relevant work if that was your only such job in the last 5 years. You see what I'm getting at? Our big goal, if so, is to prove you can't do any of your prior work and you can't transfer those skills to other work that you could do. So being specific with that in mind is what's really important. Because once that's step 4 of the sequential evaluation process, and once you get through that, you go to step 5 and they look to see if there are other jobs you can do. If you could transfer skills you had before, they can look at skilled jobs that are different now. If you had no skills that could be transferred because you can't do those things anymore, whether it's dealing with the public or it's not the kind of skill that was transferable to begin with, then those jobs would be off the table. Now there would be no skilled jobs that they could consider. And now they can only consider you for unskilled jobs. And for the over 50 crowd, as you know, depending on whether you have gotten yourself down to prove that you could do no more than light or no more than sedentary, depending on your age, is whether you can clinch your case. Okay, so that's part 2 of the new work history report. Those things are all very, very new. We'll go into part 3, which is the second of the 2 pages that they have for each job. And we'll do that hopefully shortly. That too has changed. And I think it's good. They asked for details that we have been fighting with forever to prove are important to show someone would not be able to do that job again. Okay, so they're finally delving in. It's a lot more fair, I think. All right, so that's enough of that. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.